Hey guys, tonight we're doing something a little different. And by different, I mean potentially lethal. We're dropping you into the Sakha Republic of northeastern Russia, better known as Yakutia, where the thermometer reads -71 degrees Celsius and you have exactly 0 modern conveniences to keep you alive. No heated cabin. No electric blanket. No convenient call for rescue button. Just you, the traditional tools of nomadic reindeer herders, and 3 days to prove that the human body is either remarkably resilient or remarkably stupid for ever settling in a place this hostile. You're probably thinking, -71? That's not a real temperature. That's a number someone made up to scare children. But here's the thing, it is real, and Yakutia holds the distinction of being the coldest permanently inhabited place on Earth. The village of Oymyakon recorded -67.7 degrees Celsius back in 1933, though locals swear it's dropped below -70 degrees Celsius multiple times when there just happened to be no one around with working thermometers. Because, at a certain point mercury freezes solid and even alcohol thermometers throw up their hands in surrender. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from and what time it is there. I'm genuinely curious if anyone's listening from somewhere that's actually cold right now, or if you're all tucked into your climate-controlled bedrooms, living vicariously through hypothetical frostbite. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You open your eyes and immediately regret it. Not because of what you see, the pre-dawn darkness is absolute, a blackness so complete it feels textured, but because the moisture in your eyelashes has frozen them partially shut. You blink, hard, feeling tiny crystals crack and break. The air you breathe in through your nose feels like inhaling broken glass. It's not a metaphor. At -71 degrees Celsius, the moisture in your nostrils freezes instantly, and each breath requires conscious effort to pull super-chilled air into lungs that really don't want it. You're lying in what the Sakha people call a balagan, a traditional tent-like structure, though the one you're in is partially collapsed and offers about as much protection as a cotton t-shirt in a hurricane. The reindeer hides you've wrapped yourself in are stiff as plywood, frozen from your own breath condensing and solidifying on the fur. You can see that breath now, not as a gentle mist but as actual ice crystals that tinkle when they fall onto the hide covering your chest. It's almost pretty, in a "this is how I die" sort of way. The Sakha, also called the Yakuts, have lived in this region for somewhere between 600 and 2,000 years, depending on which archaeologist you ask and how much they've had to drink. Historians still argue whether they migrated from the Lake Baikal region to the south or represent an older indigenous population, but everyone agrees on one thing. They're either incredibly brave or suffered from a spectacular failure of the Tribal Navigation Committee. Let's settle here. Where winter lasts 9 months and summer is that one afternoon in July when it only drops to -5 degrees Celsius. You shift position and hear something crack. For a terrifying moment you think it's a bone. But no, it's just the leather of your boot. At these temperatures, materials behave in ways their manufacturers never intended. Metal becomes brittle and can shatter like glass. Rubber turns into something with the flexibility of ceramic tile. Plastics snap like crackers, which is why you're grateful, in a distant, hypothetical way, that everything around you is organic, animal hide, wood, bone, sinew. The technology of survival here is Stone Age not because of primitiveness, but because Stone Age materials are actually superior when the thermometer goes full apocalypse. Your first task is simple. Don't die in the next 30 seconds. Then don't die in the 30 seconds after that. Repeat approximately 8,640 times, and congratulations, you've survived day 1. The Sakha have a saying, "The cold has teeth." You're beginning to understand this isn't poetic. It's anatomically descriptive. You can feel those teeth now, biting through the 7 layers you're wearing, each one scavenged or traded from the traditional nomadic kit. Innermost is a layer of soft reindeer fur worn with the hair against your skin. The Sakha discovered centuries ago that this creates a microclimate of trapped air, your personal atmosphere, heated by your body. Over that, a layer of coarser deer hide with the hair facing out. Then comes your sun, a coat of winter reindeer fur taken from animals culled in November when their coat is thickest. The reindeer didn't donate this willingly. But then again, survival rarely involves consent forms and ethics committees. Your feet are wrapped in ethner boots made from reindeer leg fur, which is apparently the Hermes of Arctic footwear. The lower leg fur of a reindeer is hollow-shafted, creating thousands of tiny insulating air chambers. It's essentially biological bubble wrap. Over the boots you've wrapped strips of hide and more fur, creating something that looks like you've stolen the feet off a yeti. But here's the thing about minus 71 degrees Celsius. It doesn't care about your 7 layers. It doesn't respect your reindeer boots or your carefully constructed microclimate. Cold at this extreme isn't an absence of heat. It's a presence, an aggressive force that actively hunts for warmth and destroys it. Thermodynamics becomes a predator. You need to move, but movement is dangerous. Every action burns calories you can't afford to lose, and every motion pumps blood to your extremities where it cools rapidly. But staying still means the cold wins by default, creeping into your core degree by degree until your organs simply give up. It's a mathematical problem. Minimize caloric expenditure while maximizing heat retention while not remaining so still that you become an organic popsicle. The scientific term is cold trap, though the Saka probably have a more colorful name for it. You're trapped between two forms of death, and the margin of error is measured in minutes. You decide on small movements. Flex your toes inside the boots. The pain is actually encouraging because pain means nerve endings still function. Clench and release your fingers. The mittens you're wearing are, no joke, made from winter wolf fur with the claws still attached. Some Saka hunter killed that wolf, probably in equally ridiculous temperatures, and now you're wearing his hands. Circle of life, Simba. Outside the partially collapsed Balagan, you can hear nothing. Absolute silence. At minus 71 degrees Celsius, sound travels differently. The air is so cold and dense that sounds are muffled, absorbed. There are no birds. They had the sense to migrate approximately 4,000 miles south. No wind at the moment, which is actually fortunate because wind at these temperatures doesn't just lower the wind chill, it becomes a weaponized force. A 20 kilometers per hour breeze at minus 71 degrees Celsius creates a wind chill around minus 100 degrees Celsius, which is the point where exposed skin freezes in under 60 seconds and your eyeballs can literally frost over. Fun fact, during the absolute coldest snap ever recorded in Yakutia, February 1933, in case you're keeping score, residents reported that their breath froze midair and fell to the ground with an audible tinkle. They called it the whisper of the stars. Romantic name for sublimated human respiration, but sure, let's go with that. You finally force yourself into a sitting position. The reindeer hides fall away from your torso, and the cold hits like a physical blow. You gasp, which is a mistake, because that gasp delivers a bolt of frozen air deep into your lungs. You cough, and the moisture in that cough freezes before it can leave your mouth. You're literally coughing ice. 3 days, 72 hours, 4,320 minutes. You count them because counting gives you something to do besides contemplate the statistical probability of your survival, which, let's be honest, isn't great. The Saka who live here full-time have generations of genetic adaptation and cultural knowledge. You have a brief instructional period and stubborn determination. It's not exactly a fair fight. But here's what you do have: the accumulated wisdom of a people who've made this work for centuries. The nomadic herders of Yakutia aren't superhuman, though their ability to casually function at temperatures that would hospitalize most humans suggests otherwise. They're simply the end result of cultural evolution in an environment that doesn't tolerate mistakes. Every technique you'll use over these 3 days has been refined through trial and error, where error meant a frozen corpse found in spring thaw. You look around the dim interior of the Balagan. Dawn is maybe an hour away, though at this latitude and time of year, dawn is a generous term for the vague lightening of darkness to slightly less oppressive darkness. In winter, Yakutia gets about 3 to 4 hours of weak, slanted sunlight. The rest is twilight or full darkness, which does wonders for your circadian rhythm and absolutely nothing for your mental health. Your supplies are minimal, organized in the nomadic tradition where every item serves multiple purposes because carrying extra weight in the Arctic is the difference between mobility and death. Near your left hand, a small leather pouch containing dried horse fat, a bone scraper, needles made from bird bones threaded with sinew, and a strike-alike kit that you're going to become very intimate with shortly. Near your feet, a sealed container made from a reindeer stomach containing frozen fish. The fish are so frozen they could be used as hammers, which is actually one of their potential uses in a pinch. You have a small axe with a bone handle, metal handles being useless because they conduct cold directly to your palm and can cause instant frostbite. You have strips of dried meat that are currently frozen into shapes suggesting their previous container was not entirely flat. And you have knowledge, transmitted through generations, about how to not die when the universe is actively trying to kill you. The Saka measure time differently in winter, not in hours or minutes, but in breaths, warmths, and darknesses. A breath is how long you can work outside before your lungs start to burn. A warmth is the duration a body part stays functional before requiring rewarming. A darkness is the period between sleeps, because at these temperatures you don't sleep through the night. You take strategic rest periods that don't allow your core temperature to drop into dangerous territory. You're about to experience all three measurements intimately. Your immediate goal: survive until the slight temperature increase that comes with dawn. In Yakutia winter, that might mean a balmy minus 68 degrees Celsius. Every degree counts. Every single one. You pull the reindeer hides back around your shoulders, and you begin the first full day of your 3-day survival trial. The cold has teeth, and you've just volunteered to stick your head in its mouth. Welcome to Yakutia. Try not to become a statistic. You run a mental inventory, because in survival situations, knowing exactly what you have is the difference between clever improvisation and tragic irony. The tragic irony being when someone finds your frozen body next spring surrounded by tools you didn't know how to use. Your mittens, those wolf fur monstrosities with the claws still attached, aren't just for warmth. The Saka designed them with an opening along the palm that allows you to temporarily expose your fingers for fine work while keeping your hand mostly insulated. It's brilliant, really. You can manipulate small objects for maybe 20 seconds before your fingertips start screaming. Then you tuck them back into the fur pocket where your palm heat slowly revives them. It's like those hand warmer packets you buy at ski resorts, except it's your own body heat and there's no customer service department to complain to when it stops working. The wolf claws serve a practical purpose too. They're gripping tools. When everything is coated in frost and ice, when leather becomes slippery and wood grows a crystal skin, those claws dig in. You can grab, hold, pull. The Saka waste nothing. That wolf provided meat, fur for your mittens, sinew for thread, bones for needles and scrapers, and probably several other items you haven't identified yet. It's circular economy before that became a corporate buzzword. Around your neck, wrapped multiple times, is a long strip of Arctic fox fur. This isn't fashion, it's a breath-warming device. When you need to move outside the Balagan, you'll pull this up over your nose and mouth, breathing through the dense fur. The fox fur traps the moisture from your exhalations, preventing it from freezing in your lungs or on your face, and slightly pre-warms incoming air. Slightly. We're talking maybe bringing minus 71 degrees Celsius air up to a toasty minus 65 degrees Celsius before it enters your respiratory system. Your lungs throw a small parade at this generosity. Next to your sleeping arrangement sits what looks like a small wooden bucket, but it's actually a kumis container. Fermented mare's milk that's frozen solid right now. The Saka drink this stuff year-round. In summer, it's a mildly alcoholic, yogurt-like beverage. In winter, it's a popsicle that requires thawing in your mouth. But here's the genius. Kumis is calorie-dense and contains probiotics that apparently help with everything from digestion to preventing scurvy. Russian scientists in the 1960s studied Saka winter nutrition and discovered their traditional diet somehow provided complete nutrition despite consisting primarily of meat, fat, and fermented dairy. No vegetables, no fruit, just animal products and the occasional foraged item from the brief summer. Historians still argue whether this represents brilliant nutritional insight or spectacular luck, but the results speak for themselves. The Saka are here, and most other populations would be dead. Your most critical tool sits in a leather pouch tied to your waist, the Strike-alike kit. Inside is a piece of flint, a curved steel striker, and, most precious, a small bundle of char cloth. This cloth has been partially burned in a low-oxygen environment, turning it into pure carbon that catches sparks like a politician catches blame. The Saka traditionally made char cloth from willow bark or dried mushroom. creating a material that could hold a coal for several minutes while you carefully transported it to actual tinder. But here's the problem. At minus 71 degrees Celsius, even striking a light becomes an adventure in applied physics. Metal becomes brittle. Your cold fingers don't want to grip properly. The sparks you create are fighting against air so cold it wants to extinguish them immediately. Fire making in these conditions isn't a skill. It's a battle against thermodynamics, and thermodynamics has a much better win-loss record than you do. You also have a small bone knife, edges sharpened to a degree that would make a surgeon jealous. Bone holds an edge surprisingly well and, unlike metal, doesn't conduct cold. You can grip it without fear of instant frostbite. The Saka have used bone tools for millennia, not as primitive technology but as the superior choice for this environment. There's a lesson here about assumptions of progress, but you're too cold to contemplate anthropology. Tucked into various pockets and pouches are items that seem almost quaint. A coil of braided sinew rope, thin but incredibly strong. Several strips of dried willow bark, which serves as both cordage and emergency tinder. A small bag of rendered reindeer fat mixed with crushed charcoal. This is your emergency waterproofing, fire starter, and in desperate situations, emergency calories. It tastes like exactly what it is: animal fat mixed with burnt wood. The Saka don't eat it for pleasure. They eat it to not die, which is a distinction you're beginning to appreciate. You have needles made from bird bone, hollow, light, and surprisingly durable. Thread made from caribou sinew, which when wet becomes slightly sticky and then dries rock hard, creating essentially a sewn and glued seam. If your clothing tears, you can repair it. If your shelter develops a gap, you can close it. The needle and thread represent agency in an environment that wants to strip you of all control. Near your feet is your water situation, which is really more of a water problem. You have a reindeer stomach container, but it's currently empty because water at minus 71 degrees Celsius is a theoretical concept. You're surrounded by snow and ice, but melting it requires heat energy you don't have yet. The Saka solution: eat snow in very small amounts, letting your mouth heat slowly melt it before swallowing. This is wildly inefficient. It takes significant body heat to convert ice to liquid water, burning calories you desperately need. But dehydration at these temperatures is insidious. The air is so dry it pulls moisture from your body with every breath. You need water even if obtaining it costs precious energy. Some Saka herders carry a small copper pot for melting snow heated over fires. You don't have this luxury. You have organic materials and desperate creativity. The fish, let's talk about the fish. You have 3 of them, each about the length of your forearm, frozen into shapes that suggest they were flash-frozen mid-swim. These are omul, a species of whitefish from the local rivers. The Saka catch them in autumn and simply leave them outside. Instant freezer. The fish freeze so quickly that ice crystals don't have time to form and rupture the cell walls, meaning the texture when thawed, if you ever manage that, remains surprisingly good. It's like cryogenic preservation, but the freezer is literally everything outside your body. The traditional way to eat these: slice off thin shavings with your bone knife and let them thaw in your mouth. You're eating sashimi, Arctic style. Each fish represents maybe 500 to 600 calories, so your 3 fish give you approximately 1,500 to 1,800 calories total for 3 days. Here's some unfortunate math. At minus 71 degrees Celsius, your body burns somewhere between 5,000 to 7,000 calories per day just maintaining core temperature. That's more than double your normal metabolic rate. It's like running a marathon while sitting still. Your 3 fish provide maybe enough calories for half a day of survival at these temperatures. The rest has to come from your body's stored reserves, fat, then muscle, then vital organs in a process that ends with you not watching any more YouTube videos. The Saka solve this through their traditional diet. They eat constantly. Horse meat, reindeer meat, fish, mare's milk, and significant quantities of fat. They don't apologize for the fat content. They celebrate it. Fat is 9 calories per gram compared to 4 for protein or carbohydrates. In Yakutia, fat isn't unhealthy, it's literally life-saving fuel. You have perhaps 200 grams of horse fat in your supplies, which sounds disgusting but represents about 1,800 calories of pure energy. Combined with the fish, you're looking at maybe 3,500 calories total for 3 days. The math doesn't work. You're going to be running a serious caloric deficit, which means your body is going to start consuming itself for fuel. The trick is to not let it consume anything vital before the 72 hours are up. Your shelter, this partially collapsed balagan, deserves examination. The structure is essentially a conical framework of larch poles covered with reindeer hides and layers of birch bark. Or at least it was before whatever calamity partially collapsed it. Now it's more of a 3/4 of a balagan, with one side open to the elements. This is not ideal. The Saka designed these shelters to trap heat. A small fire in the center can raise the interior temperature from -71 degrees Celsius to maybe -30 degrees Celsius, which your body interprets as a tropical vacation. But you don't have a fire yet. That's your next immediate crisis. The larch poles are interesting. Larch is one of the few trees that thrives in Yakutia. It's a deciduous conifer, which sounds like a contradiction but perfectly suits this landscape of contradictions. Larch wood is dense, rot-resistant, and remains workable even in extreme cold. The Saka use it for everything from building frames to tool handles. The resin in larch is also flammable even when frozen, which makes it excellent emergency tinder if you can scrape enough of it together. You notice one of the collapsed poles has a split in it, revealing amber-colored resin. This is treasure. You use your bone knife to carefully scrape the resin into a small pile on a flat piece of bark. It crumbles like hard candy, each fragment holding potential heat energy. This is going into your fire-starting kit. The reindeer hides covering the structure are heavy, stiff with cold and age. Some show repair work, careful stitching with sinew, patches sewn over patches. These hides have probably been used for years, passed down or traded. In Yakutia, material goods aren't disposable. They're maintained, repaired, and used until they literally disintegrate. A good reindeer hide can last a decade with proper care. These hides represent someone's wealth, their security, their barrier against the cold's teeth. You also have, strapped to the inside of your coat, a small leather pouch containing what the Saka call tinder bones. These are the hollow bones of small birds, filled with rendered fat and plugged with moss. They're essentially primitive candles. Light one end, and it will burn slowly, providing a small flame for several minutes. You have 3 of these. 3 chances to bootstrap a larger fire from nothing. 3 precious opportunities you absolutely cannot waste. Your clothing deserves closer inspection because it's the only thing between you and rapid death. The innermost layer, that soft reindeer fur against your skin, is from a summer-killed deer. Summer reindeer fur is shorter, softer, less dense. Perfect for creating a thin, insulating layer without bulk. The next layer is autumn fur, longer and beginning to thicken. Then winter fur from a December reindeer, which is like wearing a duvet. Over that, your sun coat, which is essentially armor against cold. The Saka traditionally create these layered systems because they understand something modern outdoor gear is only now rediscovering. You need air gaps. Each layer traps air, and air is a terrible conductor of heat, which is exactly what you want. You're essentially wearing a series of thermal boundaries, each one slowing the transfer of your precious body heat to the murderous environment. Your pants are similarly layered, inner layer of soft hide, outer layer of winter reindeer fur with the hair facing out. The Saka cut these in a loose style that allows for air circulation while preventing direct contact between layers, maximizing the insulating effect. Your butt is currently sitting on a folded reindeer hide, keeping you off the frozen ground which would otherwise suck heat from your body through conduction faster than you could possibly replace it. Everything is designed around one principle: maintain the barrier. Your body creates heat. The environment wants to steal it. Every item you possess is a soldier in this war, buying you time measured in body temperature degrees. You reach for the bone scraper, a flat piece of bird bone with one sharpened edge, and begin the process of preparing your fire materials. This will take time, careful work, and fingers that are already complaining about the cold despite the wolf fur mittens. But fire is non-negotiable. Fire is survival. Fire is the difference between a difficult 3 days and becoming another cautionary tale about respecting the cold. The Saka have a saying, A man without fire is a dead man with a heartbeat. You're about to prove that saying wrong, or become another data point supporting it. The first rule of shelter at -71 degrees Celsius is simple. Any shelter is better than no shelter, but barely. The second rule is more nuanced. Your shelter is only as good as your ability to keep the heat you generate inside it, and right now, with one side of your balagan collapsed and gaps in the hide covering large enough to throw a frozen fish through, you're essentially camping inside a very polite suggestion of protection. You need to fix this before you do anything else, because attempting to start a fire in a structure that's open to the elements is like trying to fill a bathtub with the drain open. Thermodynamics doesn't care about your effort. It only cares about equilibrium, and at -71 degrees Celsius, equilibrium means you match the temperature of everything around you, which means dead. The Saka approach to shelter repair is methodical because panic at these temperatures burns calories and clouds judgment, both of which kill you. You take a moment to assess the damage with the critical eye of someone whose life depends on getting this right. The balagan's framework consists of roughly 20 large poles arranged in a cone shape, their tops meeting about 3 meters above the center. Think of it as a teepee, but designed by people who understood that aesthetic concerns rank somewhere below, not freezing to death on the priority list. 3 of the poles have snapped near their base, probably from the expansion and contraction that happens when wood temperatures fluctuate even slightly. At -71 degrees Celsius, materials are at the extreme end of their thermal tolerance. The snapped poles have caused a cascade failure where one section of the hide covering has pulled away, creating a gap roughly the size of a sleeping adult. Through this gap, you can see the pre-dawn darkness and a few stars that appear sharper than usual. That's the cold air, so dry and clear that there's virtually no atmospheric distortion. Beautiful, also deadly. You have 3 options: repair the existing structure, build a supplementary windbreak, or construct an entirely new shelter. The third option is off the table immediately. You don't have time, materials, or energy to start from scratch. The second option is possible but inefficient. The first option, repair, is your best bet, but it requires going outside into the full bite of the cold. Before you move, you prepare your body. You pull the fox fur up over your nose and mouth, arranging it so you can breathe through the dense fur. You check that your wolf fur mittens are secure, with the palm openings closed. You take several deep breaths through the fox fur, pre-warming your respiratory system as much as possible. The Saka call this telling your body the plan, preparing your system for the shock of extreme cold exposure. It's not scientific, but then again, the Saka have survived here for centuries, so perhaps their folk wisdom has more validity than peer-reviewed journals would admit. You stand slowly, because rapid movement floods your extremities with blood that will cool quickly. The reindeer hides fall away, and even inside the partial shelter, the temperature drop is noticeable. Your 7 layers suddenly feel like 2. The opening of the balagan faces away from the prevailing wind, basic Saka design, but away from prevailing wind doesn't mean much when wind can come from any direction and bring instant death with it. You push aside the hide flap that serves as a door and step outside. The cold hits you like a physical entity. It's not a gradual chill. It's an immediate, aggressive assault. You gasp involuntarily, and the fox fur traps most of the moisture, but you can still feel ice crystals forming in your nasal passages. Your eyes water reflexively, and those tears try to freeze on your eyelashes. You blink rapidly, keeping them moving. The darkness is nearly complete, but your eyes have adjusted enough to see shapes. The balagan's broken side is worse from outside. The poles haven't just snapped, they've splintered, creating jagged edges that have torn the reindeer hide covering. You're going to need to bind the poles and patch the hide, and you need to do it before your fingers stop working, which at these temperatures gives you maybe 3 to 4 minutes of fine motor control before you're reduced to fumbling with club hands. The Saka technique for emergency pole repair is elegant. You create a splint using smaller branches and bind them tightly with sinew. The sinew, when exposed to even slight warmth from your hands, becomes pliable. When it refreezes, it contracts and hardens, creating a joint stronger than the original wood. It's basically organic rebar. You rush back inside. Even 30 seconds outside has lowered your core temperature slightly, and grab several items. Your coil of sinew cord, the bone knife, and 3 straight branches you spotted earlier lying inside the shelter. These branches are roughly thumb-thick, large, still retaining some flexibility despite the cold. Perfect. Back outside. The cold is waiting for you like a predator. You move to the first snapped pole and work quickly. Using the bone knife, you shave a flat surface on both the broken pole and the splinting branch. The Saka discovered that creating matching flat surfaces increases the contact area and makes the binding more secure. You hold the splint against the break and begin wrapping sinew around it, pulling each loop tight. Your fingers are already aching. The pain is good, it means tissue damage hasn't begun yet. When the pain stops, that's when you worry, because that's when frostbite has progressed beyond surface level into actual cell death. You work faster, wrapping, pulling, tying. The sinew resists. It wants to be rigid at this temperature. You use your mouth heat to warm small sections before wrapping them, breathing on the cord through the fox fur. First pole repaired. You move to the second, repeat the process. Your fingers are beyond aching now. They're in that numb, painful state where you can barely feel them, but they hurt anyway. This is the paradox of extreme cold. Numbness and pain existing simultaneously. Second pole done. Third pole. Your hands are shaking now, whether from cold or adrenaline or the beginning stages of hypothermia. You're not sure. Doesn't matter. The third pole gets its splint, gets wrapped, gets secured. You've been outside maybe 4 minutes total. You stumble back into the balagan and immediately tuck your hands into your armpits, the classic warming position. The pain as blood flow returns is exquisite. A burning, stabbing sensation as your capillaries redilate and oxygen-rich blood floods back into tissues that were on the verge of damage. You breathe through it, forcing yourself to stay calm. Panic increases heart rate, which increases blood flow to extremities, which means more heat loss. Calm, slow, methodical. The poles are repaired, but the hide covering is still torn and pulled away. This is actually the more critical repair because fabric, even thick reindeer hide, provides most of your thermal barrier. The poles just hold the fabric up. You wait several minutes for your hands to fully recover, flexing your fingers, watching the color return. The Saka have gradations of frostbite risk indicated by finger color: normal pink, white, then a waxy yellow-white. You stayed in the pink zone. Barely. Now for the hide. You pull it inside to examine the damage in the dim light. The hide has multiple tears where it caught on the splintered poles. 3 significant rips, each several inches long. These need to be sewn, and sewn well, because any gap is a thermal leak. But here's the challenge. Reindeer hide at -71 degrees Celsius has the pliability of plywood. You can't just push a needle through it. The Saka solution involves a multi-step process that combines ancient technique with practical physics. First, you identify the tears and use your bone knife to carefully trim the ragged edges, creating clean lines that will accept stitching better. Then comes the clever part. You take the hide and place it on your chest inside your coat layers, using your body heat to very gradually warm a small section. This takes patience. Rush it, and you'll burn through precious calories warming dead material. Take too long and you'll lose core temperature. It's a balance. While waiting for the hide to warm enough to become workable, you prepare your needle and sinew thread. The needles are bird bone, specifically from the wing bones of large waterfowl that migrate through Yakutia in summer. These bones are naturally hollow, strong, and when sharpened to a point, they penetrate hide remarkably well. The Saka women who make these needles are treated with significant respect. A good needlemaker provides tools that literally save lives. The sinew thread is from reindeer leg tendons, dried and separated into thin fibers, then slightly dampened with your mouth moisture to make them pliable. In the Saka tradition, sewing is not women's work or men's work. It's survival work. Everyone learns, because everyone's life might depend on an emergency repair in conditions that won't wait for gender role discussions. You pull the hide from inside your coat. The small section you've warmed is now flexible enough to work with, still stiff but workable. You pinch the torn edges together and begin sewing, using a technique called the running backstitch. Each stitch goes through the hide, loops back, comes up ahead. This creates a double layer of thread at each point, providing redundancy. If one thread breaks from cold stress, the others hold. Your fingers are complaining again, even inside the mittens. Fine motor control at these temperatures is measured in seconds. You work in bursts, 30 seconds of sewing, then hands tucked away to warm. 30 seconds, then warm. It's agonizingly slow, but rushing leads to mistakes, and mistakes at minus 71 degrees Celsius tend to be fatal. Historians still argue whether the Saka learned their sewing techniques from other Arctic peoples or developed them independently, but everyone agrees the results are remarkable. A properly sewn hide seam is actually stronger than the original material and, when sealed with rendered fat, becomes completely waterproof and airtight. You're not going to achieve master craftsman level on your first try in near total darkness with frozen fingers, but you're going to give it your best attempt. First tear closed. The stitching is uneven and would make a traditional Saka grandmother weep, but it holds. You pull the thread tight and tie it off with a knot that's more hope than technique. Second tear. Repeat the process. Warm the section, so warm your hands, so again. Your world narrows to just this needle, sinew, hide, cold. Everything else fades. This is meditation through necessity. Third tear. Your hands are shaking steadily now. You've been at this repair work for perhaps 20 minutes, and your core temperature has dropped slightly. Not dangerously yet, but trending in a direction you don't like. You force yourself to slow down, to not rush these final stitches. A bad repair now means catastrophic heat loss later. Final stitch. Tie off. Done. You examine your work with the critical eye of someone who understands their life depends on these repairs. The stitching is crude but secure. The tears are closed. Now you need to seal them. You retrieve your pouch of rendered reindeer fat mixed with charcoal. This mixture serves multiple purposes. The fat provides waterproofing and wind blocking, while the charcoal adds structural stability and makes the mixture less attractive to any desperate animal that might try to eat your shelter. You warm a small amount between your palms, which is slightly painful but necessary, and then smear it over the sewn seams, working it into the stitches and surrounding hide. The fat freezes almost immediately, creating a hard seal. It's not beautiful, but beauty is not the goal. Function is the goal. Survival is the goal. Now comes the challenge of remounting the repaired hide onto the framework. This requires going outside again, and your body is already sending subtle signals that it's not thrilled about this plan. Your fingers ache with a deep, bone-level cold. Your face, even protected by the fox fur, feels tight and wind-burned despite the lack of wind. Your toes inside the reindeer fur boots are just barely maintaining circulation. But the alternative is spending 3 days in a shelter with massive thermal leaks, which means burning through calories at an even faster rate, which means death by day 2 instead of day 3. Motivation is a wonderful thing. You grab the repaired hide, drape it over your shoulders, adding another layer of insulation temporarily, and head outside again. The cold is waiting, patient, and hungry. Working as quickly as frozen hands allow, you drape the hide over the repaired framework, using the attached ties to secure it to the poles. The Saka designed these hides with built-in attachment points, strips of leather or sinew sewn at strategic locations. You're essentially reassembling a three-dimensional puzzle where all the pieces are frozen solid and your hands don't entirely work. Tie one corner. Move to the next. The hide is heavy, stiff, fighting you. Tie the next corner. Keep moving. Don't stop. Stopping means thinking about how cold you are, and thinking about it makes it worse. Final corner secured. You step back, except you don't, because your boot has frozen to a patch of ice on the ground. You have to shift your weight and crack the boot free, which would be funny if you weren't so focused on not dying. You examine the shelter from outside. It's not perfect. There are small gaps where the hide doesn't quite meet the poles, places where your rushed repairs show their inadequacy. But it's 90% sealed, which is 90% better than before. In Arctic survival, you don't achieve perfection. You achieve good enough to not kill you. Back inside, you collapse onto your reindeer hide bed, breathing hard through the fox fur. Your entire body is shaking now, the post-exertion shivering that's actually your metabolism ramping up to restore your core temperature. This shivering is burning calories, maybe 300 in just these few minutes, but it's non-negotiable. Your body demands warmth or it will begin shutting down non-essential systems, with essential being determined by very primitive brain structures that don't care about your 3-day survival plan. You've succeeded in the first critical task. creating a shelter that will allow you to attempt fire starting without the cold immediately extinguishing your efforts. The Balagan now has structural integrity and a mostly sealed thermal envelope. It's not warm. It's still probably minus 70 degrees Celsius inside, but it's protected from wind and will trap any heat you manage to generate. You lie still, letting your body recover, watching the tiny ice crystals from your breath fall and glitter in the almost dawn light filtering through the hide walls. Each crystal represents moisture you've lost, energy you've expended, resources your body can't easily replace. The shelter is ready. Now you need fire. And fire at minus 71 degrees Celsius is going to require every bit of knowledge, skill, and luck you can muster. The cold has teeth and you've just finished building a fence. Now you need to build a weapon. Fire is chemistry, physics, and psychology all wrapped into a phenomenon that humans have worshipped, feared, and depended on for roughly 400,000 years. At minus 71 degrees Celsius, fire is also extremely difficult to initiate, temperamental to maintain, and absolutely essential for survival. No pressure. You sit cross-legged on your reindeer hide, organizing your fire-starting materials with the methodical care of a surgeon preparing for an operation where the patient is you. The Saka approach to fire in extreme cold follows a specific sequence, developed over centuries of trial and error, where error meant freezing to death and success meant you got to try again tomorrow. First, you need to understand what you're fighting against. Fire requires three things: fuel, oxygen, and heat, the classic fire triangle. At minus 71 degrees Celsius, all three elements are working against you. Your fuel is frozen, which means its molecular structure is locked tight, making it harder to gasify and ignite. The oxygen in the air is denser due to the extreme cold, which sounds helpful but actually means you need more initial heat energy to get a reaction started. And heat, well, heat is trying to escape to the surrounding environment faster than you can generate it. The Saka solution involves creating a sequence of increasingly larger heat sources, each one bootstrapping the next. You start with a spark, nurse that into a coal, grow the coal into a flame, feed the flame with progressively larger tinder, and eventually achieve actual fire. Each step is a potential failure point, and there are no do-overs if you waste your limited materials. Your strike-a-light kit sits before you: the flint, the steel striker, and your precious char cloth. You also have your 3 tinder bones, those hollow bird bones filled with fat and plugged with moss, but those are your nuclear option, to be used only if the primitive method fails. You also have your scraped larch resin, some shavings from the interior of the driest larch poles, and a small pile of dried willow bark fiber that you've been keeping inside your coat, using your body heat to drive out any residual moisture. The char cloth deserves special attention. This material, made by heating plant fiber in a low-oxygen environment, is essentially pure carbon with a huge surface area. Catches sparks like a politician catches scandal, easily and with immediate results. The Saka traditionally make char cloth from amadou fungus, which grows on birch trees and, when processed, creates what's essentially organic tinder that can hold a coal for 10 to 15 minutes. Your char cloth is about the size of your palm, dark brown to black, and represents perhaps your best chance at creating fire before your fingers become too cold to continue. But here's a problem you're only now fully appreciating. Metal becomes brittle at extreme cold. Your steel striker at minus 71 degrees Celsius is at the edge of its material tolerance. Strike it too hard, and it might shatter rather than produce sparks. Strike it too softly, and you won't generate enough heat for ignition. It's a Goldilocks problem, except instead of porridge, you're dealing with thermodynamics that want you dead. You begin the warming ritual. The striker goes inside your coat, pressed against your chest. The flint goes in your armpit. The char cloth you hold between your palms, breathing warm air onto it through a small gap in the fox fur covering your mouth. This pre-warming is crucial. Starting with materials at minus 71 degrees Celsius is nearly impossible. Starting with materials at minus 20 degrees Celsius is merely extremely difficult. While you wait for the materials to warm slightly, you prepare your fire pit. The Balagan has a depression in the center, about half a meter across, where countless fires have been built. The ground here is slightly scorched, and more importantly, it's been insulated by the previous fire's ash. You clear away any frost or ice crystals, creating a clean area. Then you arrange a small platform of the driest wood scraps you can find. This will keep your initial tinder off the frozen ground, preventing the earth from sucking away heat before the fire can establish itself. The Saka call this platform the fire's bed, and it's non-negotiable. Fire built directly on frozen ground dies almost instantly, heat conducting into the permafrost faster than combustion can spread. Your fire bed is crude, just some flat pieces of larch bark arranged in a slight cone, but it will serve. Next, you arrange your tinder in a careful nest. The innermost layer is the finest material, your willow bark fiber, teased apart until it's almost cotton-like. This will accept the coal from your char cloth. Around that, you place slightly coarser bark shavings. Then your larch resin scrapings, these are gold, because resin is essentially tree blood concentrated into flammable hydrocarbons. Even frozen, resin wants to burn. Finally, the outer layer, thin splinters of larch wood, arranged in a teepee shape with an opening where you'll insert the burning tinder nest. This arrangement took you perhaps 5 minutes to create, and your hands are already complaining about the cold. You tuck them into your armpits for a warming cycle. The waiting is psychological torture. Every minute spent preparing is a minute burning calories without generating heat. But rushing fire starting is how you waste your limited materials and end up with no fire and no second chances. The Saka have a saying, patience feeds the fire, haste feeds the cold. Your striker has warmed slightly from your body heat. You retrieve it along with the flint and char cloth. The char cloth you place on top of a small piece of flat wood. This will catch the spark and protect your leg from the coal's heat. You position the flint in your left hand, striker in your right, char cloth ready beneath. Now comes the moment. You strike down flint against steel using a firm, glancing blow. Nothing. The metal is still cold, resistant. You strike again. Again nothing. Third strike and suddenly a spark. Just one. A tiny orange arc that flies and dies instantly in the frozen air. But it proves the concept works. You adjust your angle slightly and strike again. Another spark, brighter. Again, a shower of sparks, and you watch them fall toward the char cloth, holding your breath without realizing it. One spark lands. The char cloth glows red for a fraction of a second. Then, nothing. It wasn't quite hot enough, or the char cloth wasn't quite dry enough, or the air was too cold, or any of a dozen other variables didn't align properly. You resist the urge to curse, that would waste warm air, and instead strike again. More sparks. One lands, two land. A small red glow appears on the char cloth and stays. It's working. The coal is forming. Now the critical phase, nurturing that coal into flame. You carefully fold the char cloth around the coal. Not too tight, which would smother it, but tight enough to concentrate the heat. You bring it to your mouth and blow on it gently through the fox fur, adding oxygen to the reaction. The coal glows brighter. Again, gentle breath. The glow spreads slightly. Your hands are steady despite the cold, despite the adrenaline, despite the knowledge that dropping this coal means starting over. You've achieved fire's first stage. You have heat captured in the structure of carbonized plant material. Now to transfer that heat to actual fuel. You place the glowing char cloth bundle into the center of your tinder nest, nestled into the fine willow bark fiber. You blow on it again, watching the bark begin to smoke. More breath. The smoke thickens. You're seeing the gasification of plant material as the heat breaks down the cellulose into combustible vapors. Almost there. More breath, longer this time. The bark suddenly glows orange, spreading from the char cloth. You've reached ignition temperature. You blow once more, and suddenly, flame. Actual, visible fire. A small yellow tongue licking up from the tinder nest. The relief is physical, a tension release you didn't know you were holding. But this is no time to celebrate. The flame is tiny, fragile, and the minus 71 degrees Celsius air is actively trying to extinguish it. You carefully, with hands that are shaking from cold and adrenaline, lift the burning tinder nest and place it into the center of your prepared wood arrangement. The flame flickers, threatens to die, then finds new fuel. The larch splinters catch, their resinous wood igniting with a small crackle. More splinters catch. The fire begins to establish itself, growing from flame to actual fire. You're not done. Fire at this stage is still vulnerable. You begin feeding it carefully. Small pieces first, then gradually larger. Each addition must be dry enough to ignite but substantial enough to add heat energy rather than just consuming it. It's a balance, and the Saka learned this balance from childhood, watching elders, making mistakes when the consequences are low. You don't have that luxury. You're learning in real time in conditions that punish errors immediately. But something remarkable is happening. Heat. Actual, tangible warmth. The fire is now putting out enough thermal energy that you can feel it on your face, even through the fox fur. It's not much. The air temperature inside the balagan has probably risen from -71 degrees Celsius to maybe -65 degrees Celsius, but your body notices and celebrates that 6-degree difference with a hormonal surge that feels like victory. The fire grows. You add larger pieces of wood, watching to ensure each one catches before adding the next. The Saka technique is to build a fire in a square pattern rather than a teepee once it's established. For main fuel pieces arranged in a hashtag pattern, with smaller pieces across the top. This design maximizes airflow underneath while creating a stable platform that won't collapse and scatter burning wood across your shelter. Smoke is rising now, finding its way through the small opening at the apex of the balagan where the poles meet. The hide walls don't have a proper smoke hole. This isn't a permanent structure, so smoke is also leaking through small gaps in the hide. This is actually acceptable. It means you're not creating a carbon monoxide trap. The Saka have learned through tragic experience that an airtight shelter with a fire inside is a death trap of a different kind. You need ventilation, even though ventilation means heat loss. The fire is established now, burning steadily with flames reaching perhaps 30 centimeters high. You sit back, still feeding it occasionally but no longer in emergency mode. The transformation is remarkable. 15 minutes ago you were in crisis, fighting to create heat in an environment absolutely hostile to it. Now you have fire, that ancient technology, that fundamental human achievement. Historians still argue about when humans first controlled fire. Estimates range from 2 million years ago to a mere 400,000 years ago. But there's no debate about fire's importance to human evolution. Fire allowed cooking, which made nutrients more bioavailable, which allowed brain growth. Fire enabled humans to spread into cold climates. Fire created social gathering points where language and culture could develop. Fire is arguably the technology that made us human. And now, at -71 degrees Celsius in Yakutia, fire is the technology keeping you alive. The temperature inside the balagan is rising noticeably now. Your face no longer feels like it's being stabbed by ice needles. Your fingers are regaining full sensation. You can take deeper breaths without that sharp pain in your lungs. The fire is small, you're burning maybe 1 kilogram of wood per hour at this rate, but the thermal impact is dramatic. You take stock. Fire achieved. Shelter secured. 2 of your 3 critical survival needs met. The third, water, can now be addressed using the fire's heat. You retrieve your reindeer stomach water container and pack it full of clean snow from just outside the balagan entrance. Then you place it near the fire, not directly in it, where the radiant heat will gradually melt the snow. This process is inefficient. It takes roughly 100 calories of heat energy to melt enough snow to produce 1 liter of water, but with fire, you're no longer constrained by your body's limited caloric reserves. While the snow melts, you attend to your next priority, warming your core. The fire is providing ambient heat, but you're still operating at a significant caloric deficit. You need to consume calories, and you need to warm your food enough that eating it doesn't lower your core temperature. You pull out one of your frozen omul fish and place it on a flat rock near the fire. Not too close, you don't want to cook it, just thaw it enough to slice. The Saka eat much of their winter food raw or barely thawed because cooking consumes fuel that might be needed for heating. It's a cultural adaptation that modern nutritionists found horrifying until they realized the Saka have basically 0 incidence of parasitic infections. The extreme cold kills parasites, making raw fish safe in Yakutia in a way it absolutely isn't in temperate climates. After several minutes, the fish has thawed enough that your bone knife can slice through it. You cut thin pieces, placing them on your tongue and letting them warm in your mouth before chewing and swallowing. Each piece is maybe 30 calories. You'll need to consume the entire fish, about 500 calories, to make a dent in your energy deficit. The fish tastes like cold fish. There's no other way to describe it. It's not unpleasant, but it's not particularly enjoyable either. It's fuel, and you treat it as such, mechanically consuming piece after piece. The water container is now steaming slightly. The snow has melted into water and is warming past freezing. You wait until it's warm enough to drink without shock to your system, then take your first liquid in hours. The sensation is remarkable. Your body has been mildly dehydrated, and the water hits your system like medicine. You drink perhaps half a liter, forcing yourself not to gulp at all. You need to ration this, make the snow last, because gathering more means going outside and expending energy. You sit by the fire, finally allowing yourself a moment of something almost like comfort. You're not comfortable. Your muscles ache from tension, your skin is windburned, your lips are cracked despite the cold, and you're sitting in a hide tent at what is still probably minus 55 degrees Celsius. But you're alive, you have fire, and you have shelter. Against the teeth of the cold, you've built defenses. The fire crackles and pops as frozen wood explosively releases trapped moisture. Each pop is a small reminder that you're in an environment so extreme that materials behave in unexpected ways. The larchwood burns with a faint sweet smell, the resin adding aromatics to the smoke. You'll need to tend this fire constantly. Let it die, and restarting at these temperatures will be even harder. Your char cloth is used up, your hands are more cold damaged, your energy reserves lower. The Saka tradition is to have someone awake at all times in winter, feeding the fire, because a dead fire means a potential dead family. You're alone, which means you'll be taking short rest periods and waking to tend the flames. But for now, in this moment, you've achieved what seemed impossible 30 minutes ago. You've created heat where none existed. You've pushed back against thermodynamics and won. The cold still has teeth, but you've just shown it you have teeth too. And yours can make fire. The fire has been burning for roughly 2 hours now, and you've entered what the Saka call the balanced state, where the heat you're generating roughly equals the heat you're losing, creating a fragile equilibrium that feels almost comfortable if you don't think about it too hard. The temperature inside the balagan has risen to perhaps minus 45 degrees Celsius, which your body interprets as practically tropical compared to the minus 71 degrees Celsius outside. This is delusion, of course. At minus 45 degrees Celsius, exposed skin still freezes in minutes, water turns to ice almost instantly, and your survival is still very much in question. But relative comfort is still comfort, and you'll take it. Your next challenge is food management, which is really a polite way of saying, how do you not starve to death over the next 60 hours? The math remains brutally simple. You're burning somewhere between 5 and 7,000 calories per day just maintaining core temperature, plus whatever you expend on physical activity. Your available food, 3 fish and maybe 200 grams of horse fat, totals roughly 3,500 calories. You're looking at a deficit of at least 10,000 calories over 3 days, probably more. The human body can survive significant caloric deficits for short periods. People fast for days, even weeks, with medical supervision. But those people aren't also fighting minus 71 degrees Celsius temperatures. They're not asking their metabolism to simultaneously defend against cold while running on empty. What you're about to experience is something closer to what Antarctic explorers in the heroic age endured, or what mountaineers face at extreme altitude. Your body beginning to consume itself for fuel while still being asked to perform. You've already eaten 1 fish, 500 calories, and you can feel your body processing it, breaking down proteins and fats into usable energy. But that fish represents only about 7 to 10% of what you'll burn today. The rest has to come from stored reserves. First glycogen in your liver and muscles, then fat, then, if this goes on long enough, muscle protein. The Saka who live here year-round maintain significant body fat precisely for this reason. They're not overweight by any medical definition. They're optimally adapted. You, however, probably started this ordeal with modern levels of body fat, maybe 15 to 20% if you're male, 20 to 30 if female, which gives you some buffer but not 3 days worth. The horse fat sits near you, wrapped in a piece of hide. 200 grams doesn't look like much. It's roughly the size of a bar of soap. But at 9 calories per gram, it's 1,800 calories of pure energy. The question is how to consume it in a way that doesn't make you immediately vomit. because gastrointestinal distress at -45 degrees Celsius in a hide tent is a situation you'd rather avoid. The sake have several traditional preparations for fat. The simplest is to cut it into small cubes and eat it raw, letting it melt slowly in your mouth. This works better when the fat is from recently butchered animals and hasn't spent weeks or months in storage getting oxidized and rancid. Your horse fat is, well, let's charitably call it aged. It has that slightly yellowish tinge and suspicious smell that suggests the horse it came from has been dead for a while. The second method is to render it, melt it over the fire and mix it with other ingredients to make it more palatable. The sake sometimes mix rendered fat with crushed berries, or pine nuts or dried meat, creating something approaching pemmican. You don't have berries or pine nuts, but you do have two more fish. You could render the fat and dip pieces of fish in it, essentially creating the world's saddest fish and chips. You opt for the rendering method, mostly because the alternative is eating a soap-sized lump of questionable horse fat raw, and your gag reflex draws the line somewhere. Using a flat piece of bark as a makeshift plate, you place chunks of the fat near the fire. The fat begins to melt slowly, liquefying into a clear yellowish oil. The smell is intense. It's not entirely unpleasant. There's something almost nutty about it, but it's also distinctly animal. A smell that reminds you this came from inside a creature's body. While the fat renders, you slice your second fish into slightly larger pieces than before. The first fish you ate in slivers, being cautious. Now that you know your stomach can handle frozen fish, you can be more efficient. Each piece is roughly 2 bites, maybe 40 calories. You dip a piece into the melted fat and consume it. The combination is actually not terrible. The fat adds richness and, more importantly, calories. The fish provides protein and some omega-3 fatty acids that your brain desperately needs. Together, they're creating a meal that's somewhere between survival rations and actual food. You won't find this in restaurants, but your body doesn't care about Michelin stars right now. It cares about energy and energy you're providing. You eat methodically, piece by piece, fat-dipped fish after fat-dipped fish. Your stomach, which hasn't had to process this much fat in possibly years, sends up some protest signals. You slow down, give it time to adjust. The sake diet is extremely high in fat by modern standards, somewhere around 50 to 60% of calories from fat, and their digestive systems are adapted to it. Yours isn't, but it will have to manage. Halfway through the second fish, you stop. Not because you're full, you could easily eat more, but because you need to ration. You have 1 more fish and roughly half the rendered fat remaining. That needs to last you 2 more days. If you consume everything now, you'll have energy for today but nothing for tomorrow, and tomorrow you will be angry with today you for that short-sighted decision. The discipline required to stop eating when you're hungry and could eat more is psychologically brutal. Every instinct screams to consume available calories. But survival isn't about instinct. It's about overriding instinct with planning. The sake teach children this early. When food is available, you're not eating for now. You're eating for the future. You're eating to survive the next scarcity. You wrap the remaining fish carefully in hide and place it in the coldest part of the balagan, away from the fire, near the wall. At these temperatures, it will stay frozen indefinitely. The remaining fat you let solidify back into a semi-solid state, then wrap and store it alongside the fish. Current caloric intake, approximately 1,000 calories. That's roughly 1/7 of what you'll burn today. The remaining 6/7 will come from your body's reserves. You can almost feel your metabolism ramping up, your body beginning to break down fat stores, releasing ketones into your bloodstream as it shifts from glucose-based energy to fat-based. This metabolic shift is called ketosis, and while it's popular in certain diet circles, experiencing it at -71 degrees Celsius adds a dimension those diets don't typically include. The symptoms of ketosis are starting already. A slight metallic taste in your mouth, a subtle change in your breath smell, and a mental clarity that comes from your brain running on ketones instead of glucose. Some people find ketosis makes them sharper. Others find it makes them foggy. You're about to find out which camp you fall into, whether you want to or not. Water is your next concern. You've drunk perhaps half a liter since melting the snow, but at these temperatures, your fluid needs are actually higher than normal. The air is so dry that each breath pulls moisture from your lungs and respiratory tract. You're essentially breathing in a desiccant. Your body needs to humidify every breath of -45 degrees Celsius air before it reaches your lungs, which means adding water vapor, which means losing water. You pack more snow into your reindeer stomach container and place it near the fire. The process is tedious. Gather snow, melt it, wait, drink, repeat. But dehydration at these temperatures is insidious. It doesn't announce itself with obvious thirst because your body's thirst mechanism is suppressed by the cold. You can become seriously dehydrated without feeling particularly thirsty, and dehydration impairs judgment, increases susceptibility to frostbite, and generally makes everything worse. The Saka measure hydration by urine color, the same way modern survival guides recommend. Clear to pale yellow, adequately hydrated. Dark yellow to amber, dehydrated. You make a mental note to monitor this, though doing so in a high tent at -45 degrees Celsius is going to be its own adventure in logistics and discomfort. While the snow melts, you take stock of your physical state. Your fingers and toes are all present and functional, no frostbite yet. Your face feels windburned and raw, but the skin is intact. Your lips are badly chapped, cracked in several places. The Saka solution for this is animal fat applied directly to the lips, which sounds medieval but actually works because it creates a moisture barrier. You apply a small amount of your rendered horse fat to your lips, and the relief is immediate. Your muscles ache with a deep, cold-induced tension. Even near the fire, you can't fully relax. Your body maintains a slight shiver, a muscle tremor that generates heat. This is non-shivering thermogenesis, an involuntary process that burns calories to produce warmth. It's efficient from a survival standpoint, but exhausting over time. You've been in a state of slight shiver for hours now, and your muscles are fatigued from the constant low-level contraction. The psychological aspect of eating so little while being so hungry is harder than the physical aspect. Your brain keeps sending signals. Eat more, you have food. Why are you starving yourself? These signals are coming from parts of your brain that evolved in environments where food scarcity was common but -71 degrees Celsius temperatures were not. Your prefrontal cortex, the rational planning part, has to constantly override these more primitive urgings. It helps to think of your remaining food as a resource pool with a specific depletion rate. You have approximately 2,500 calories remaining. Over 2 days, that's 1,250 calories per day, which is roughly 1/5 to 1/6 of your needs. Not enough to prevent metabolic breakdown, but enough to slow it significantly. The goal isn't to avoid caloric deficit, that's impossible. The goal is to manage the deficit so that your body doesn't begin consuming vital muscle tissue or organ protein. Historians still argue about how pre-contact Arctic peoples managed prolonged winter periods when hunting was impossible and stored food ran low. Some evidence suggests they entered a state of semi-hibernation, remaining relatively inactive to conserve energy. Other evidence suggests they maintained activity levels but accepted significant weight loss as a normal part of winter survival. The truth is probably somewhere in between, varying by group and circumstance. What's clear is that the Saka and other Arctic peoples developed extraordinary metabolic flexibility. Their bodies can switch efficiently between fuel sources, can tolerate longer periods in ketosis, and can preserve muscle mass better during caloric restriction compared to populations without Arctic heritage. You don't have these adaptations, which means your experience over the next 2 days will be harder than what a Saka nomad might experience in similar circumstances. The fire needs more wood. It always needs more wood. You've been burning perhaps 1 kilogram per hour, which means you've already gone through 2 kilograms of your limited supply. You step outside carefully with all protective layers secured to gather more fuel from the small pile near the Balagan entrance. The cold hits you like it's personal. Even after hours near the fire, even with your body temperature closer to normal, stepping into -71 degrees Celsius is a shock. Your breath crystallizes instantly into a cloud of ice particles that tinkle as they fall. Your eyes water reflexively, and you blink rapidly to prevent the tears from freezing. You grab several pieces of wood, larch branches roughly arm-thick, and retreat back inside. Total exposure time, maybe 20 seconds. But those 20 seconds lowered your core temperature slightly, and you can feel your body ramping up heat production in response. burning more of those precious calories. Back by the fire, you arrange the new wood carefully. The sake technique is to create a fuel reserve next to the fire where wood can gradually warm and dry before being added to the flames. Frozen wood doesn't burn well. Too much energy goes into driving off ice crystals and warming the wood to combustion temperature. Pre-warmed wood ignites more easily and burns more efficiently. You sit, watching the flames, feeling the heat on your face. The balagan has become your world. A 3-meter circle of relative warmth surrounded by an infinite universe of cold. Everything beyond the hide walls might as well not exist. Your focus narrows to immediate concerns: fire, water, rationed food, maintaining core temperature. The mental shift is interesting. In normal life, you probably think about dozens of things: work, relationships, entertainment, future plans, past regrets. Here, all that mental noise has fallen away. You think about fire. You think about cold. You think about the piece of fish you'll eat in 6 hours. Your consciousness has simplified to survival fundamentals, and there's something almost meditative about it, if meditation involved constant low-level fear of freezing to death. The Saka have stories about people who spent extended periods alone in winter camps, hunting or tending distant herds. These people sometimes reported a mental state they called winter mind, a simplified consciousness where the normal chatter of thought quiets and awareness becomes very present, very focused. Some found it peaceful. Others found it disturbing. You're beginning to understand what they meant. You check your water, fully melted, warm enough to drink. You consume another half-liter, forcing yourself to drink even though you don't feel particularly thirsty. Hydration is like fire maintenance. You don't wait until it's a crisis to address it. The fire crackles. The hide walls of the balagan snap and pop as they contract and expand with temperature fluctuations. Outside, the wind has picked up slightly. You can hear it moaning past the shelter. Inside, you sit with your meager supplies and your burning fire and your slowly depleting body, counting down the hours until you can allow yourself another small portion of food. Day 1 isn't over yet, but you're surviving it. That's something. That's everything, really. Time becomes strange when you're sitting in a hide tent at -45 degrees Celsius with nothing to do but not die. You've been awake for what feels like 12 hours but might be 6 or might be 20. Your phone, if you had one, which you don't because this is a traditional survival scenario, would tell you exactly how much time has passed. Instead, you're relying on the subtle lightning and darkening visible through the hide walls, and at this latitude in deep winter, that's not particularly helpful. The sun makes a brief, low arc across the southern horizon, providing maybe 3 hours of weak, slanted light that barely qualifies as daylight before darkness returns. You've been marking time by fire maintenance. You've added wood roughly 30 times, which at every 15 to 20 minutes means you've been here somewhere between 7 and 10 hours. Not precise, but it's something to hold on to. Time measurement matters because humans are temporal creatures. We need structure, sequence, a sense of progression. Without it, we start to drift psychologically, and psychological drift at -71 degrees Celsius leads to poor decisions which lead to death. The Saka traditional method of winter timekeeping is fascinating. They use physiological markers rather than mechanical devices. Hunger cycles, sleep cycles, the need to urinate, the progression of cold from extremities toward core. Your body is a clock, and if you pay attention to it, you can navigate time without ever seeing a watch. Historians still argue whether this represents superior awareness or simply adaptation to necessity, but the result is that Saka elders can estimate time with surprising accuracy using nothing but internal cues. You're discovering this works. You're hungry again, not desperately so, but noticeably. Based on your earlier eating, that means roughly 4 to 5 hours have passed. Your bladder is making itself known, which aligns with the water you've been consuming. Your body is settling into rhythms, and those rhythms are becoming your chronometer. But there's another temporal phenomenon happening, one that's less comfortable. Time dilation from monotony and mild hypothermia. Minutes feel like hours. You find yourself staring at the fire, watching flames dance, and suddenly realize you have no idea if 30 seconds or 30 minutes have passed. Your mind wanders, comes back, wanders again. You're not losing consciousness, your core temperature is stable, but you're experiencing what psychologists call time distortion under stress and sensory deprivation. The balagan is relatively quiet. Fire crackle, your own breathing, the occasional pop of contracting wood or hide. Outside, wind sounds that rise and fall. There are no voices, no mechanical noises, no music, no screens, no inputs beyond the most basic sensory information. For someone from the modern world, this level of sensory deprivation is almost unnatural. Your brain keeps expecting stimulation that doesn't come. The Saka children are raised in this kind of quiet. They learn to be comfortable in silence, to sit for hours without external entertainment, to find interest in subtle changes. The way firelight moves, the patterns in wood grain, the sound variations in wind. It's not meditation in the formal sense, but it's a kind of comfortable presence that modern people rarely experience. You're being forced into it now, and it's mildly unsettling. Your thoughts begin to loop. You think about the cold outside, then you think about the fire, then about your remaining food, then back to the cold. The same circuit over and over like a worn groove in vinyl. This is normal. Under stress and isolation, human minds tend toward repetitive thinking. It's energy efficient for the brain, requiring less glucose than creative or novel thought. Your brain is conserving energy just like the rest of your body. But there's a danger here. Repetitive thought can spiral into obsessive thought, which can lead to anxiety, which increases heart rate and metabolic demand, which burns calories you can't spare. You need to break the loop, give your mind something else to do. The Saka solution is storytelling. Even alone, especially alone, they tell themselves stories, family histories, hunting tales, creation myths, anything to occupy the mind constructively. Stories provide structure, sequence, beginning, middle, end. They're mentally engaging without being metabolically expensive. Your brain can run a story on minimal glucose. You don't have traditional Saka stories memorized, but you have your own mental library. You could replay favorite movies in your head, reconstruct books you've read, mentally compose letters to people you know. The content doesn't matter. The mental engagement does. You choose to mentally reconstruct the layout of your childhood home, room by room, trying to remember every detail. Kitchen, white cabinets, tile floor with that one cracked tile near the fridge, the window that looked out on the backyard. Living room, blue couch, the television that was always slightly too loud, the bookshelf your father built. This exercise is grounding, connecting you to a time and place that was safe, warm, temperature-controlled. The detail work is surprisingly engaging. What color were the curtains in your bedroom? Which way did the door swing? What posters were on the walls? Some details come easily. Others are frustratingly elusive. Your brain has stored this information somewhere, but retrieval is spotty. Memory is strange. You can remember the smell of your mother's cooking, but not the exact arrangement of furniture in the dining room. This mental exercise carries you through perhaps 30 minutes. You're guessing based on how much the fire has burned down. It's enough to break the thought loop, to give your consciousness something to do besides contemplate your situation. But now you're back to present awareness, and with it comes the full weight of your physical discomfort. Your lower back aches from sitting. Your legs are cramping slightly. You've been maintaining essentially the same position for hours because movement means heat loss, and you're metabolically optimized for stillness. But stillness for this long is its own torture. You stand, slowly, and immediately feel the blood rush from your head. A moment of dizziness, you haven't eaten much, and your blood pressure is probably lower than normal. You steady yourself, then begin gentle movement. Arm circles, leg stretches, rotating your spine. Nothing vigorous, just enough to work out the stiffness and get blood flowing to compressed tissues. The movement feels good but also worrying. You can feel how much weaker you are than 12 hours ago. Your muscles respond more slowly with less strength. This is the beginning of the metabolic breakdown you knew was coming. Your body has exhausted readily available glycogen and is now deeper into fat metabolism, and the efficiency isn't the same. You're running on a less optimal fuel, and it shows. After a few minutes of movement, you sit back down. The brief activity has increased your heart rate and metabolic demand. You can literally feel yourself getting colder as blood that was warmed near your core circulates to your extremities and cools. Your body begins shivering more noticeably to compensate. This is the paradox. You need to move to prevent stiffness and maintain circulation, but movement costs heat and energy. The optimal strategy is short, gentle movement sessions followed by longer periods of stillness. You're basically treating your body like a barely functioning machine, coaxing the minimum necessary performance from limited resources. Your mind drifts again, but this time not to memories, to sensations. You become hyper-aware of your body in a way you never are in normal life. You can feel your heart beating, slower than normal. Your cardiovascular system is conserving energy. You can feel your breathing, each inhalation of cold air, each exhalation of moisture. You can feel your skin, the boundary between your warm interior and the cold exterior, doing its job as a thermal barrier. There's a concept in meditation called body scanning, systematically bringing awareness to each part of your body. You're doing this now not as spiritual practice but as survival monitoring. Toes, cold but mobile, no numbness. Feet, adequate circulation. Legs, some cramping but functional. Core warm, stable. Arms, functional. Hands, cold at the fingertips, warm at the palms. Face raw, chapped, but no frostbite. The scanning becomes almost obsessive. You check your extremities constantly, flexing fingers and toes, assessing sensation. The fear of frostbite is always there, a low-level anxiety that you can't entirely suppress. Frostbite is insidious. It can begin and progress without pain once the nerves are damaged. You could lose fingers or toes and not realize it until the damage is irreversible. The Saka say you should listen to your cold. Pay attention to the specific quality of cold in different body parts. There's the ache of superficial cold, the deep bone cold of serious heat loss, the burning sensation of incipient frostbite, the numbness of actual tissue damage. Each has a different quality, and experienced people can distinguish them. You're learning this taxonomy faster than you'd like. Hunger returns, stronger now. Your stomach is actively growling, sending clear signals that it wants food. You check your mental clock. It's been roughly 5 hours since you ate. You could eat now, or you could wait longer, stretch the rations further. The debate in your head is surprisingly intense. Every minute you wait is another minute of metabolic stress. Every minute you wait is also another minute your limited food supply lasts. You compromise. You'll eat a small amount now, maybe a quarter of your remaining fish, just enough to quiet the hunger and provide some calories. You retrieve the fish, which is frozen solid again after being stored near the cold wall. You place it near the fire to partially thaw, then cut a small portion, maybe 150 calories worth. You eat it slowly, chewing thoroughly, trying to extract maximum satisfaction from minimum food. The fish tastes better than before, which probably says more about your hunger level than any change in the fish's flavor. Your stomach receives the food gratefully, the digestion process beginning, releasing some energy your body desperately wants. But it's not enough. The hunger doesn't go away. It just becomes quieter, less insistent. This is what the next 48 hours will feel like. Constant, nagging hunger that's never fully satisfied, never entirely quiet. The Saka call this winter belly, the state of being perpetually hungry during the scarce months. They've normalized it, treated it as simply part of winter existence rather than a crisis. You're trying to adopt that mindset, but modern conditioning makes it difficult. You're used to eating when hungry, to having that discomfort immediately addressed. The psychological battle of not eating when food is available, of voluntarily maintaining hunger, might be harder than the physical cold. Your brain was shaped by millennia of food scarcity, wired to consume available calories immediately because tomorrow's food was never guaranteed. Now you're asking it to override that programming, to trust that future you will be better served by present you's restraint. The fire needs attention again. It always needs attention. You add wood, adjust the arrangement, ensure good airflow. The fire is your job, your responsibility, your purpose. It gives structure to the endless hours. Feed the fire, gather water, ration food, monitor body, repeat. This is your life now, simplified to its most basic elements. Outside, the brief period of weak daylight is fading. You can tell by the quality of light filtering through the hide. It's going from gray to dark gray on its way to black. Night in Yakutia winter lasts somewhere around 20 hours. 20 hours of darkness, of depending entirely on firelight, of losing even the minimal temporal markers that daylight provides. You're not looking forward to it, but you don't have a choice. The night comes whether you're ready or not. You settle in, feeding the fire, sipping melted snow, existing in the space between cold and warmth, hunger and sustenance, consciousness and the growing desire to escape into sleep. But sleep at these temperatures is dangerous. Sleep too deeply, and you won't wake to tend the fire. Let the fire die, and you'll wake to temperatures that have dropped back toward lethal. The Saka technique is to sleep in short cycles, never more than 45 minutes, always waking to check the fire. You're going to have to learn this rhythm, train your body to wake reliably. Because if you fail, if you sleep through a critical fire-tending moment, you won't get a second chance to learn from the mistake. The cold has teeth and it's patient. It will wait for you to slip, to make one error, to let exhaustion or hunger or monotony compromise your vigilance. You cannot slip. Not once. Not for 3 days. The fire crackles. The darkness deepens. And you sit watching flames, counting minutes, managing your deteriorating resources, waiting for time to pass. Day 1 is almost over. 2 more to go. The paradox of extreme cold survival is that you're simultaneously too still and not still enough. You need to minimize movement to conserve calories and prevent heat loss from increased circulation. But you also need to maintain enough movement to prevent your blood from literally thickening, your joints from seizing, and your muscles from degrading into useless frozen meat. It's a biological tightrope, and you're walking it with diminishing energy and growing exhaustion. You've entered what you estimate is hour 15 of your ordeal, which means you're roughly halfway through day 1. The darkness outside is complete now, that deep, textured blackness that makes you understand why ancient peoples feared night. Your only light is the fire, which casts dancing shadows on the hide walls and creates a bubble of visibility that extends maybe 2 meters in any direction. Beyond that, nothing. The world could have ended, and you'd have no way of knowing. Your body is sending increasingly urgent signals about movement. Your legs have gone beyond cramping into a kind of deep, aching stiffness. Your hip joints feel like they've been welded into position. Your spine is compressed from hours of sitting, and standing up now requires real effort, accompanied by alarming cracking sounds as vertebrae shift and realign. But here's the problem: moving burns calories. Standing, walking, stretching, these activities increase your metabolic rate, demand energy from reserves you don't have. The Saka have calculated, through centuries of trial and error, that the optimal movement strategy at extreme cold is brief, controlled activity every 2 to 3 hours. Enough to maintain circulation and prevent dangerous stiffness, not so much that you burn through your caloric reserves. You force yourself to stand, gritting your teeth through the discomfort. Your legs shake slightly, whether from weakness or cold or both. You begin a series of movements that the Saka teach: controlled leg lifts, arm swings, torso rotations. Nothing sudden, nothing vigorous. Just gentle mobility work designed to move blood, flex joints, and remind your muscles they still have a job to do. As you move, you can feel your heart rate increase. Your breathing deepens. Blood that was pooled in your core begins circulating to your extremities. Your fingers tingle as capillaries dilate. Your toes ache as warmth returns. This is good, necessary, but you can also feel the cold biting harder as more of your blood is exposed to the lower temperatures of your extremities. The movement reveals how much you've degraded in just 15 hours. Your strength is noticeably diminished. Movements that should be easy require concentration. Your balance is slightly off, you sway more than you should. Your coordination is impaired. Your fingers don't quite do what you want them to do on the first try. These are the symptoms of caloric deficit, mild hypothermia, and prolonged stress combining to degrade your physical performance. After maybe 5 minutes of movement, you're actually colder than when you started. Your core temperature has dropped slightly as warm blood circulated to your extremities and returned cooled. Your shivering has increased noticeably. Your body is burning more calories to generate more heat to compensate for the heat lost during movement. It's a vicious cycle. You move to prevent problems, but the movement created different problems. You return to sitting, pulling the reindeer hides tight around you, feeding the fire to boost the ambient temperature. It takes perhaps 10 minutes for your shivering to decrease, for your core temperature to restabilize. Those 10 minutes of increased metabolic activity probably burned an extra 50 to 75 calories. You moved for 5 minutes and paid for it with enough energy to sustain you for almost an hour of rest. The math is brutal, and it's getting worse as your caloric reserves deplete. Early in a fasting period, your body has plenty of readily accessible energy. Glycogen stores, abundant fat, efficient metabolic processes. But as the fast extends, and you're effectively fasting while simultaneously asking your body to heat itself against minus 71 degrees Celsius, efficiency decreases. Your body starts making trade-offs, sacrificing non-essential functions to preserve essential ones. You're beginning to feel these trade-offs. Your thinking is slightly slower, not dramatically impaired, but you notice you have to work harder to maintain focus. Your short-term memory is slightly fuzzy. You realize you can't quite remember if you last added wood to the fire 5 minutes ago or 15. Your emotional regulation is beginning to slip. Minor frustrations feel more significant, and you catch yourself feeling disproportionately angry at the fire for burning unevenly. These cognitive effects aren't severe yet, but they're trending in a concerning direction. The human brain, despite being only about 2% of body weight, consumes roughly 20% of your resting caloric expenditure. When calories become scarce, the brain doesn't get a free pass. Cognition becomes more effortful, decision-making becomes harder, and errors become more likely. The Saka are aware of this phenomenon. They call it hunger mind or winter fog. They teach that when you notice your thinking becoming unclear, you should stop making important decisions. Don't decide to travel. Don't decide to change your shelter location. Don't decide to ration your food differently. Just maintain your current strategy until your mental clarity returns, which usually means after eating or after resting. It's good advice and you're trying to follow it, but there's a problem. You're alone. There's no one to reality check your decisions, no one to say, "That's the hunger mind talking. Don't do that." You have to be your own monitor, which requires the very cognitive resources that are becoming impaired. It's like trying to use a broken measuring stick to determine if your measurements are accurate. You decide on a simple rule. Make no changes to your current strategy unless absolutely necessary. Fire maintenance stays the same. Food rationing stays the same. Movement schedule stays the same. This removes decision-making from the equation and reduces the chance that impaired cognition will lead to poor choices. But stillness brings its own challenges. When you're not moving, when there's nothing demanding your immediate attention, your mind wanders into uncomfortable territory. You think about how much this hurts. You think about how much you want this to be over. You think about warm beds and hot meals and climate-controlled rooms. These thoughts are poison. They increase suffering without providing any practical benefit. The psychological term is rumination. Repetitive, negative thinking that amplifies distress. You're starting to ruminate, catching yourself in thought spirals about discomfort, about the unfairness of being cold and hungry, about how much easier other people have it. These thoughts are normal, human, and completely counterproductive. You need distraction, but you're running low on mental energy for elaborate memory exercises or story construction. You need something simpler, more automatic. The Saka use songs, simple, repetitive songs about hunting or reindeer or the seasons. The content doesn't matter. The rhythm does. Rhythm is processed in primitive brain areas that don't require much energy. You can maintain a rhythm even when higher cognition is impaired. You don't know Saka songs, but you know songs from your own culture. You begin humming softly, not out loud. That would lose heat from your breath, but internally, just enough to give your mind something to follow. The melody is simple, something from childhood, something that requires no effort to remember. Your brain latches onto it gratefully, happy to have a task that isn't think about how cold and hungry you are. The humming helps, but it also reveals how shallow your breathing has become. In extreme cold, people instinctively breathe more shallowly to minimize the volume of cold air entering their lungs. This reduces the energy needed to warm incoming air, but also means you're getting less oxygen per breath. Over time, this leads to mild hypoxia, oxygen deficiency, which contributes to the cognitive impairment and the general sense of fatigue. You force yourself to take several deep, controlled breaths. The cold air hurts going in, and you can feel your lungs working to warm it, but the increased oxygenation helps. Your head clears slightly. The mental fog lifts a bit. You make a note to do this periodically, deep breathing exercises to maintain oxygen levels, even though it costs energy to warm the air. The fire is burning lower again. It's always burning lower. You've lost count of how many times you've added wood, maybe 50, maybe 75. Each addition is the same. Select a piece of wood from the warming pile, check that it's dry enough to burn efficiently, place it in the fire arrangement to maximize airflow and heat output. It's become automatic muscle memory, which is good because thinking about it would require energy you don't have. Your water container is empty again. You need to refill it with snow, melt the snow, and drink the resulting water. The process takes energy. Gathering snow from outside means cold exposure. Melting snow means dedicating fire heat to water production rather than ambient heating. But dehydration will kill you just as surely as hypothermia, so it's non-negotiable. You prepare for the brief outside excursion. Fox fur up over nose and mouth, mittens checked and secured, movements planned in advance to minimize time outside. You push through the high door flap and into the night. The darkness is absolute. The cold hits like a physical wall. You can't see the ground, can't see the snow you're trying to gather, can barely see your own hands. You drop to your knees and scoop blindly, filling the container with what you hope is clean snow and not frozen dirt or other contaminants. Your hands are screaming within seconds, the cold penetrating even the wolf fur mittens. Back inside, gasping, your entire body shaking from the brief exposure. The container is maybe 3/4 full of snow. It will melt down to perhaps half a liter of water, barely enough for one drinking session. You'll need to do this again, soon, repeatedly. Water procurement has become another constant task, another drain on your limited energy. You place the container near the fire and curl back into your shelter position, waiting for your body to stop its violent shivering. The shivering is involuntary, your muscles contracting rapidly to generate heat. It's effective but expensive. Sustained shivering can burn hundreds of calories per hour. You're shivering less intensely than during that first exposure, which is actually concerning because it might mean your body is conserving energy by allowing your core temperature to drift lower rather than burning calories to defend it. You check yourself. Fingers mobile, toes responsive, thinking relatively clear, no signs of severe hypothermia. You're okay. Degraded, tired, hungry, cold, but okay. You're still in the game. The Saka have a concept they call the 3 battles. The battle against cold, the battle against hunger, and the battle against yourself. The first 2 are physical, manageable with technique and resources. The third is psychological, and it's the one that actually kills people. You can survive cold and hunger if your mind stays disciplined, if you resist panic and despair and the temptation to make desperate moves. But the third battle gets harder as the first 2 intensify. Cold makes you want to do something, anything, even counterproductive things, just to feel like you're taking action. Hunger makes you want to break your rationing plan, to eat everything now because your body is screaming that it needs calories immediately. These impulses are strong, and they get stronger as your cognitive defenses weaken. You're feeling the pull of both. The part of your brain that wants to pile all the remaining wood on the fire, create a massive blaze, be really warm for an hour even though it means having no fire tomorrow. The part that wants to eat both remaining fish right now, quiet the hunger, worry about tomorrow when tomorrow comes. These impulses are so visceral, so physiologically driven, that resisting them requires conscious effort. You have to actively decide, moment by moment, not to break your discipline. It's exhausting in a way that's distinct from physical exhaustion, a mental fatigue that comes from constant self-regulation under stress. The Saka teach that you resist these impulses not through willpower. Willpower is a limited resource that depletes, but through ritual and routine. You don't decide whether to eat, you eat at the scheduled time. You don't decide whether to add wood. You add wood when the fire reaches a certain burn level. You remove decision-making from the equation by following the ritual, and the ritual carries you through periods when your judgment is impaired. You're trying to create these rituals in real time. Fire maintenance every 15 to 20 minutes, water every 2 to 3 hours, food every 5 to 6 hours, movement every 2 to 3 hours. The schedule gives structure, removes the constant decision-making burden, and creates predictability in an environment of chaos. But maintaining the schedule requires tracking time, and time tracking requires cognitive resources you're running low on. You keep losing track. Was it 2 hours or 3 since your last movement session? Have you drunk water recently, or was that several hours ago? The temporal fog is settling in, and it's harder to push back against. You decide to use the fire as your clock. Each time you add wood, you make a mark in the thin layer of frost on the inside of the hide wall near where you sit. The marks are crude, just a finger dragged through the frost, but they're visible. You can count them. 5 marks means roughly 90 minutes. 10 marks means 3 hours. It's imperfect, but it's something external, something that doesn't rely on your increasingly unreliable sense of time. The system helps. You make a mark, add wood, settle back to wait. The mark is there, visible, real. It anchors you in time, provides a reference point. You're not just floating in an eternal present of cold and discomfort. You're progressing through a measured sequence. The marks prove it. 15 marks now. That's roughly 4.5 hours since you started marking, which means you're perhaps 19 or 20 hours into the ordeal. Day 1 is almost complete. You've survived the initial challenge. You have fire, shelter, water, and a tiny amount of food. Your body is depleted but functional. Your mind is fatigued but still operational. You're going to make it through day 1. The question is whether you'll make it through day 2, when you'll be even weaker, even more depleted, even less capable of responding to challenges. But that's tomorrow's problem. Right now, you tend your fire, mark the hide wall, and endure the next 15 minutes. Then the next. Then the next. Survival isn't a grand achievement. It's 1,000 tiny decisions to keep going, made one after another until time runs out or you do. You mark the wall again and feed the fire. You wake with a start, momentarily disoriented, and immediately panic. The fire is low, not out, but burning down to coals, providing minimal heat and light. You have no idea how long you've been asleep. Could be 20 minutes, could be 2 hours. The hide wall with your time-tracking marks is visible in the dim firelight, but you can't remember how many marks were there before you closed your eyes. This is the danger you knew was coming. Sleep at these temperatures isn't optional. Your body demands it, will take it involuntarily if you don't provide it voluntarily, but it's also potentially fatal. The Sokka training for solo winter survival emphasizes developing the ability to wake yourself at intervals, to never slip into the deep sleep that leaves you vulnerable. You clearly haven't mastered this skill because you just failed spectacularly at it. You lunge for the fire, hands shaking from cold and adrenaline, and begin adding wood. The coals are still hot enough to ignite fresh fuel quickly, but the ambient temperature in the balagan has dropped significantly. You can see your breath again, thick clouds of ice crystals that were absent when the fire was burning stronger. The temperature has probably fallen from -45 degrees Celsius back down toward -60 degrees Celsius or worse. Your core temperature has dropped too. You're shivering violently, your body in emergency heat generation mode. Wood on the fire. More wood. The flames catch, grow, begin pushing back the cold. You huddle as close as you dare, desperate for warmth, watching the fire rebuild itself while your body burns precious calories on shivering thermogenesis. How long were you out? You check your body for signs of serious hypothermia. Thinking seems sluggish but present. Fingers and toes are painful but mobile. Speech, you try saying a few words out loud, is slightly slurred but functional. You're hypothermic, but probably only mildly so. If you'd slept much longer, if the fire had gone out completely, you'd be in serious trouble or dead. The close call has shocked you into a state of heightened alertness. Your heart is pounding, your mind racing with the awareness of how easily this could have ended badly. You need a system, some kind of backup for your clearly unreliable internal alarm clock. The Sokka solution for solo survival involves strategic use of discomfort. You don't sleep in the warmest, most comfortable position because comfort leads to deep sleep. Instead, you arrange yourself so that as your body relaxes, you begin to experience increasing discomfort that wakes you before sleep becomes dangerous. Sounds medieval, but it works. You rearrange your sitting position, deliberately creating a setup where your back isn't fully supported, where your weight is distributed in a way that will become uncomfortable within 30 to 45 minutes. It's not pleasant, but pleasant got you into the situation you just barely escaped from. Unpleasant might keep you alive. The fire is roaring now, and with it comes the psychological comfort of having successfully navigated a crisis. But the crisis has cost you, in burned calories from the shivering, in stress hormones flooding your system, in the wood you had to pile on quickly to rebuild the fire. You've probably consumed an extra 200 calories worth of energy in the recovery, and you've burned through wood at an accelerated rate. Your survival margins just got thinner. You check your frostmark calendar on the hide wall. You count 17 marks, which means... Actually, you're not sure what it means because you don't remember if you made marks while you were trying to stay awake before you fell asleep. The system has failed. Time has become slippery again, and you have no reliable way to track it. The realization is unsettling. You could be 24 hours into this ordeal or 30. Day 1 could be over, or you could still be in the middle of it. The distinction matters because your food rationing is based on time intervals, and if you can't track time reliably, you can't ration reliably. You make a decision. Assume the worst case. Assume you're at the 24-hour mark, beginning day 2. Ration accordingly. If you're actually still in day 1, you'll have slightly more food than planned for day 3, which is a problem you'd be happy to have. Better to ration too conservatively than to run out early. Day 2. The thought sits heavy in your mind. You've made it through the initial shock, the adaptation period, the first round of resource management. Now you're entering the phase where accumulated deficits begin to seriously impact performance. You're weaker than yesterday, hungrier, more fatigued. Every task will be harder. Every decision will require more effort. The margins will keep shrinking. You perform your body assessment again, more carefully this time. Fingers, cold but functional, no signs of frostbite. Toes, same. Face, raw, chapped, the skin on your lips cracked and bleeding slightly. Core cold but stable. Mind, foggy, slower than normal but still processing. You're degraded but operational. The hunger is intense now, a constant gnawing sensation that your brief sleep did nothing to diminish. Your body is actively catabolizing itself, breaking down fat stores, beginning to eye muscle tissue as potential fuel. You can almost feel it, a sense of internal consumption, your body eating itself to stay warm. You retrieve your remaining fish, just one left now, plus the rendered fat. This fish needs to last you the rest of day 2 and all of day 3, roughly 48 hours. At maybe 500 calories total, you're looking at about 250 calories per day, which is roughly 1/20th of your metabolic needs. The deficit is catastrophic. But here's what you've learned from reading about Arctic survival. The human body can endure this briefly. Explorers in the heroic age of Antarctic exploration routinely operated at massive caloric deficits for weeks. They lost significant weight, became weak and depleted, but they survived. The key is that it was temporary, a few weeks of extreme deficit, then return to normal nutrition. You're looking at 3 days total. Severe, but survivable. The question is what state you'll be in at the end of day 3. Able to walk out under your own power? Or so weakened that you'd need assistance? Or something worse? These are unknowables, but they lurk in your mind, creating a low-level anxiety that's hard to dismiss. You cut a small piece from the fish, maybe 75 calories worth, and eat it slowly. Your stomach receives it gratefully but immediately demands more. You ignore the demand. The fish goes back into storage. You will eat again in 6 hours, assuming you can track 6 hours, which is not guaranteed. The discomfort-based alarm system works, sort of. You doze off twice more over what you estimate is the next several hours, and both times you wake within what feels like 30 to 40 minutes, roused by the awkward position you've arranged yourself in. It's working, but the sleep you're getting is poor quality, fragmented, not truly restorative. You're accumulating sleep debt on top of everything else. Historians still argue about how Arctic peoples managed sleep during the darkest periods of winter when tending fires was necessary for survival. Some evidence suggests they worked in shifts when possible, taking turns sleeping and fire watching. Other evidence suggests they developed a kind of segmented sleep pattern, sleeping in multiple short periods rather than one long consolidated sleep. You're discovering this pattern by necessity. Your sleep is breaking into 30 to 45-minute chunks, punctuated by brief periods of waking to tend the fire. It's exhausting in a cumulative way. Each individual sleep period isn't enough to feel rested, and the constant wake-sleep-wake cycle prevents deep restorative sleep. You're functioning, but you're not recovering. The fatigue is building, layering, becoming its own burden on top of the cold and hunger. Your mind is doing strange things now. You catch yourself staring at the fire, watching patterns in the flames, and suddenly realizing you've been watching for what might be 5 minutes or might be 30. Time dilation is getting worse. You'll look away, look back, and the fire will have burned down more than seems possible in what felt like a brief interval. You're also experiencing mild visual distortions. The shadows on the hide walls seem to move independently of the firelight. Peripheral vision catches shapes that disappear when you look directly. None of this is hallucination, not yet, but it's the beginning stages of what happens when the brain is deprived of sleep, proper nutrition, and normal sensory input. Your visual processing is starting to misfire, creating phantom inputs. The Saka have stories about winter spirits, entities that appear to people who've been alone too long in the cold. Modern understanding attributes these visions to isolation, sensory deprivation, and metabolic stress. The brain, desperate for stimulation and running on minimal fuel, starts generating its own inputs. The spirits aren't real, but the experiences are real, and they're disturbing. You're not seeing spirits yet, but you're aware that you might. The awareness itself is unsettling. You know your perception is becoming unreliable, which means you can't entirely trust your senses, which means you're navigating reality with faulty instruments. It's like trying to drive with a fogged windshield, possible but anxiety-inducing. You force yourself to move again, working through the stiffness that has returned. Your legs are weaker than before. Standing requires real effort, and maintaining balance is harder. Your arms feel heavy, the muscles responding slowly to commands. This is muscle catabolism, your body beginning to break down protein for fuel now that fat stores are depleting. It's a sign that you're moving into the more dangerous phase of starvation, where your body starts consuming tissues you actually need. The movement helps clear your head slightly, pushes back the visual distortions, reminds your body that it still has work to do. But the weakness is undeniable. You're significantly less capable than you were 24 hours ago. Tasks that were difficult are now very difficult. Tasks that were very difficult might soon become impossible. You return to sitting, breathing hard from the minimal exertion, and tend the fire. Always the fire. It's your anchor, your purpose, the task that gives structure to the formless hours. As long as you can maintain the fire, you have a chance. The wood supply is another concern. You've been burning roughly 1 kilogram per hour, which over 24 hours means you've consumed about 24 kilograms of wood. Your initial supply was perhaps 50 to 60 kilograms, enough for 2 to 3 days at this rate. You're potentially halfway through your fuel, which aligns with being halfway through the ordeal. But fuel consumption isn't linear. As you get weaker, gathering more wood from outside becomes harder. As the fire requires more of your attention because you're dozing off, you might burn wood less efficiently. The final day could require more fuel than the first day, right when your ability to procure and manage it is most compromised. You inventory the remaining wood inside the balagan. Maybe 30 kilograms, possibly less. Enough for another day and a half at current consumption rates, which gets you close to the 72-hour mark, but not comfortably so. You might need to gather more wood from outside, which is a task you're really not looking forward to. The thought of going outside, really outside, not just grabbing snow from near the entrance, is genuinely frightening in your current state. You're weak, cold impaired, and barely maintaining your internal temperature. Extended exposure could push you into moderate or severe hypothermia, from which recovery would be difficult or impossible with your limited resources. But running out of wood would be fatal. So if it becomes necessary, you'll have to do it. You'll have to force your degraded body into the minus 71 degrees Celsius darkness, locate and gather fuel, and return before hypothermia incapacitates you. It's a scenario you're hoping to avoid, but you're beginning to suspect you won't be able to. The fire crackles. The darkness outside is complete. Your body aches with a deep, penetrating cold fatigue that no amount of warmth seems to fully address. You've survived day 1. You're surviving day 2. The question is what condition you'll be in by day 3, and whether that condition will be sufficient to make it to the finish line. You add another mark to the hide wall, even though you're no longer confident about what the marks mean. You feed the fire. You wait for time to pass. That's all you can do. Wait, endure, survive the next hour. Then the next. Then the next. The cold has teeth and it's chewing slowly. You've lost the ability to distinguish between sleeping and waking with any certainty. You exist in a twilight state where consciousness flickers like the fire, present, then dim, then present again. Time has become completely abstract. You might be 50 hours into this ordeal, or 60 or 45. The marks on the hide wall have multiplied into a meaningless tally. You stopped counting after 30, or maybe after 40. The numbers don't matter anymore. Only the fire matters. Only staying warm enough to continue existing matters. But something has shifted. The quality of darkness outside the Balagan is different. Less absolute, tinged with the faintest suggestion of gray. Either dawn is approaching, or your visual processing has degraded to the point where you're seeing things that aren't there. You stare at the hide wall, trying to determine if the subtle lightning is real or imagined. It's real. Over the course of what might be 30 minutes or might be 2 hours, the darkness definitely lessens. Not to daylight. The sun at this latitude and season never achieves what you'd call proper daylight, but to a dim, gray twilight that's marginally less oppressive than the complete blackness you've been existing in. If dawn is coming, that means you've survived another night. Which night is unclear, second or third, but another night nonetheless. The realization brings a small surge of something that might be pride or might be relief or might be delirium. You've made it. You're still here. The cold hasn't won yet. Your body is in serious distress now. The hunger has moved beyond discomfort into a state of constant, gnawing pain. Your stomach hurts, actually hurts, cramping and protesting its emptiness. Your muscles are weak. Lifting your arm to add wood to the fire requires concentration and effort. Your thinking is slow, words forming in your mind with noticeable delay. You're not sure you could stand without assistance. You haven't tried recently because trying and failing would be psychologically devastating. The last piece of fish sits in its hide wrapping, maybe 200 calories remaining. You've been rationing it with increasingly desperate care, eating tiny pieces at long intervals. The rendered fat is gone. You consumed the last of it during a period of intense shivering, your body demanding calories immediately to fuel its temperature regulation. The fat helped briefly, but now it's gone and you're running on fumes. You cut the smallest possible piece from the fish, maybe 25 calories, and place it in your mouth. Your saliva production is diminished from dehydration, so the fish doesn't soften as quickly. You work it with your tongue and teeth, eventually swallowing, feeling it descend into your angry stomach. The stomach processes it and immediately signals that this is inadequate, nowhere near enough. You ignore the signal. The rest of the fish needs to last until, whenever this ends. You're not entirely sure when that is anymore. The water situation has become critical. You've been neglecting hydration because gathering snow requires going outside, and going outside has become genuinely dangerous in your weakened state. You're dehydrated. Your urine, when you last managed to produce any, was dark amber. Your lips are cracked and bleeding. Your mucous membranes are dry. Your blood is literally thickening, becoming more viscous, harder for your weakened heart to pump. But you need water. Dehydration will kill you as surely as hypothermia or starvation, possibly faster. You have to go outside, gather snow, melt it, drink it. The task looms enormous in your mind, requiring resources you're not sure you possess. You prepare slowly, pulling your layers tight, securing the fox fur over your face, checking your mittens. Each action requires rest breaks. Your arms shake from the simple effort of arranging your clothing. This is bad. You're significantly more impaired than you realized. The hide door flap seems impossibly heavy as you push through it. The cold outside hits you and you stagger, nearly falling. Your legs barely support your weight. The darkness has lifted to twilight, and you can see shapes now, the outline of trees, the ground, the snow. You drop to your knees because standing is too difficult and begin scooping snow into the container. Your hands don't work properly. The fine motor control is gone. You're scooping with mittened hands, getting more ice and frozen dirt than clean snow, not caring. It's taking forever. Your body is shaking violently, the cold penetrating immediately through your depleted insulation. Finally, the container is full enough. You try to stand and can't. Your legs won't support you. Panic flares. Are you going to die out here, 5 meters from your shelter, because you don't have the strength to stand? You drop to hands and knees and crawl, dragging the water container, focused entirely on the hide entrance. You collapse inside, gasping, shaking so hard your teeth are chattering violently. The container spills partially. Maybe a third of your hard-won snow scatters across the floor. You want to cry but don't have the energy. You push the container near the fire and curl into a ball, trying to generate heat through sheer will. The shivering is intense, painful, your muscles seizing and releasing in rapid cycles. This is burning calories at an enormous rate, hundreds per hour. Calories you don't have. But you can't stop it. It's involuntary, your body's last-ditch effort to prevent your core temperature from dropping into the danger zone where organ systems start failing. Time passes. The shivering gradually lessens as your core temperature stabilizes. The snow in the container melts. You drink it lukewarm, slightly dirty, the most delicious thing you've ever tasted. Your body absorbs it desperately, and you can almost feel your tissues rehydrating, your blood thinning to something approaching normal viscosity. The water helps clear your mind slightly. You're able to think with a bit more clarity, enough to assess your situation honestly. You're in serious trouble. You're hypothermic, starving, dehydrated, and weak to the point of near immobility. If something goes wrong, if the fire goes out, if you need to move quickly for any reason, you're likely incapable of responding effectively. But you're also close. If your time estimation is even remotely accurate, you're approaching the 72-hour mark. You might have 12 hours left, maybe less, possibly more, but you're hoping less because you're not sure you can survive another full day in this condition. The Saka have stories about the final day of winter ordeals, about how it's simultaneously the easiest and the hardest. Easiest because the end is in sight, because you can see the finish line. Hardest because your body is most depleted, most vulnerable, most likely to fail catastrophically. The stories emphasize that people who survive the first 2 days sometimes die on the third from simply giving up, from deciding the suffering isn't worth continuing. You understand those stories now in a visceral way. The temptation to just stop is stronger than you expected. To let the fire burn down, to stop the constant effort of survival, to slip into sleep and let whatever happens happen. It would be so easy. You're so tired. The cold is so constant. The hunger is so painful. But you don't stop. Not because you're particularly brave or strong. You don't feel brave or strong. You feel broken and depleted. But you continue because stopping requires a decision, and decisions require energy, and you're conserving every bit of energy for the only decision that matters. Keep the fire burning. The fire. Always the fire. You feed it mechanically, watching the flames, using their existence as proof that you're still functioning. As long as you can maintain fire, you're alive. When you can no longer maintain fire, you're dead. It's that simple. The twilight outside brightens slightly, achieves what passes for midday at this latitude, then begins to fade again. An entire day compressed into a few hours of weak, slanted light. You watch it happen, marking the passage of time in the most basic way possible. Light, then dark. Day, then night. Your wood supply is critically low now. Maybe 10 kilograms remaining, enough for perhaps 10 to 12 more hours of fire at current consumption. If you're 12 hours from rescue, you're fine. If you're 24 hours from rescue, you're going to run out of fuel, and running out of fuel means freezing to death no matter how many layers you're wearing. The mathematics of survival have narrowed to a single calculation. Will your wood last longer than your ordeal? There's no way to know. You can't change the amount of wood, you're too weak to gather more. You can't significantly reduce consumption, you're already burning the minimum necessary to maintain livable temperature. All you can do is wait and hope that the 72 hours expire before the wood does. Time becomes truly abstract now. You drift in and out of consciousness, waking to tend the fire, sleeping in uncomfortable positions that jar you awake before hypothermia can take hold. The cycle repeats endlessly: wake, add wood, sleep, wake, add wood, sleep. Your entire existence reduces to this cycle. At some point, you have no idea when you eat the last of the fish. All of it. Not because you plan to, but because you wake from one of your sleep periods desperately hungry, and the fish is there, and you consume it before your rational mind can intervene. The calories hit your system and provide a small surge of energy, but you also realize with sinking clarity that you now have no food remaining. If this ordeal extends beyond what you've estimated, you'll face the final hours with absolutely no caloric input. But you also can't bring yourself to care very much. The fish is eaten. What's done is done. Regret requires energy you don't have. You simply accept it and move on to the next moment, the next fire feeding, the next fragment of consciousness. The darkness outside is complete again. Another night, your third or maybe fourth, you've genuinely lost count. The wood supply is down to maybe 5 kilograms. 5 hours of fire, approximately. Either rescue comes soon, or you're going to find out what happens when the fire dies at minus 71 degrees Celsius and you're too weak to restart it. You're beyond fear now. Fear requires energy, requires a future orientation that your brain can no longer maintain. You exist in an eternal present. The fire, the cold, the pain, the exhaustion. Past and future have collapsed. There's only now and now and now again. The fire burns lower. You add wood. The fire burns lower. You add wood. The pattern repeats until you reach for wood and there's only one piece left. One piece. Maybe 30 to 45 minutes of fire remaining. You place it on the flames and watch it catch. The fire burns brightly for a moment, celebrating its final fuel. Then begins the inevitable decline toward extinction. This is it. This is where you find out if you've made it or if you've miscalculated fatally. You pull the reindeer hides tight around yourself, draw into the smallest possible shape to minimize surface area and conserve heat, and wait. The fire burns lower. The cold begins to encroach. The temperature in the Balagan drops. You can feel it clearly, degree by degree, the warmth retreating until you're surrounded by cold that's merely less lethal than the cold outside but still capable of killing you over time. The fire dies to coals, then embers, then nothing, darkness and cold. You're shivering violently again, burning through your last reserves, your body making its final stand against thermodynamics. Time passes. You're not sure how much. Your consciousness is flickering like the dead fire, present then absent then present. You might be dying. You might have already entered the early stages of the fatal decline. You're too impaired to tell. And then sound. Actual sound from outside. Voices. Human voices, calling in a language you don't understand but recognize as Saka. Footsteps. The hide entrance is pushed aside, and there's light. Flashlight beams impossibly bright, and hands reaching for you, and voices speaking urgently. You're being moved, lifted, carried. The cold outside hits you and you try to protest, try to explain that you can't survive more cold. But your voice doesn't work properly. The words come out as meaningless sounds. More movement, warmth, actual warmth. Not the marginal warmth of a struggling fire but real, substantial heat. You're inside something, a vehicle maybe, and there are blankets and warm air and people working over you with quick, efficient movements. Someone is trying to give you something to drink. Warm liquid. Your body accepts it automatically, swallowing without conscious decision. The warmth spreads through your core, and you realize you're going to survive this. You've made it. 72 hours or close enough. 3 days in hell and you've come through the other side. You want to feel triumphant, but mostly you just feel tired. So incredibly tired. The adrenaline that's been carrying you is crashing, and in its absence is a fatigue so profound it feels like gravity has increased, pulling you down into darkness. But it's okay. You can let go now. The cold doesn't have teeth anymore. Or maybe it does, but someone else is handling it. You can rest. You can sleep without fear. You can stop the endless vigilance and just stop. Your eyes close. The voices fade. The warmth remains. You've survived. The Saka nomads who found you, earlier than expected because they'd been monitoring the weather and decided the conditions were too extreme to leave you the full 72 hours. Tell you later that you were maybe 6 hours from death. Your core temperature was 33 degrees Celsius, well into moderate hypothermia. Your blood sugar was dangerously low. You'd lost roughly 7 kilograms over 3 days, a rate of weight loss that would have been unsustainable for even a few more days. But you survived. You did what the ordeal demanded. You created fire from nothing, maintained shelter, rationed food with brutal discipline, and refused to surrender when every cell in your body was screaming to give up. You proved something to yourself and perhaps to the universe, that the human spirit, when tested by the teeth of minus 71 degrees Celsius and the gnaw of starvation, can still say no, can still persist, can still endure. The Saka treats such ordeals as rites of passage, transformative experiences that teach you who you are when stripped of all comfort and convenience. You're beginning to understand why. You're not the same person who entered that Balagan 3 days ago. That person didn't know they could survive this, didn't know the depths of their own resilience, their capacity for suffering, their ability to make the hard choice over and over when the easy choice was surrender. Now you know, and that knowledge, hard-won and painful, becomes part of you forever. You've walked through fire, or rather, through the absence of fire, through cold so extreme it makes fire nearly impossible, and you've emerged changed. The Saka have a saying, "The cold teaches what comfort cannot." You understand it now, deeply and completely. Comfort teaches pleasure, satisfaction, ease. The cold teaches strength, discipline, endurance. Both have value, but only one shows you who you really are when everything else is stripped away. You rest in the warmth, recovering slowly, your body beginning the long process of repair. Outside, the Yakutian winter continues its brutal dominion, minus 71 degrees Celsius and indifferent to human suffering. But you're inside now, safe, warm, fed. The cold has released you from its teeth. You survived. That's enough. That's everything. And as your eyes grow heavy with real, safe sleep, the kind where you don't have to wake every 45 minutes to tend a dying fire, you feel something unexpected, gratitude. Not for the suffering, but for having endured it, for having faced the cold's teeth and escaped with your life and your sanity mostly intact. The ordeal is over. The learning has just begun, and you drift into sleep, finally, peacefully, knowing that whatever challenges come next, you've already survived worse. You've survived the unsurvivable, and that knowledge is a warmth no cold can touch. Sleep well, traveler. You've earned it. You've earned every moment of rest, every degree of warmth, every bite of food that will come. You've earned the right to close your eyes without fear. And so you do. Now let's ease out of this together, shall we? Take a slow breath. Feel the comfort of wherever you are right now. Your warm bed, your soft pillow, the gentle weight of your blankets. You're not in Yakutia. You're not fighting for survival against minus 71 degrees Celsius. You're safe, warm, comfortable. The cold is just a story now, something you experience through words, not something you have to actually endure. Your body is relaxing, letting go of the tension that might have built up during this journey. Your muscles are softening. Your breathing is deepening. Your mind is quieting. The fire is tended. The shelter is secure. There's nothing left to do but rest, truly rest, without vigilance or fear. The nomads of Yakutia continue their ancient patterns, surviving in conditions that would seem impossible to most of the world. They carry forward knowledge accumulated over centuries, passed from generation to generation, refined through countless winters of trial and learning. They're remarkable people, adapted to a remarkable place, proving that humans can inhabit even the most extreme environments with enough knowledge, discipline, and community support. But tonight, their world is far away. Tonight, you're wherever you are, safe in the modern comforts they probably don't think much about. Central heating, insulated walls, abundant food, clean running water. These things are miracles, really. We just forget to notice because we have them all the time. But after walking through a Yakutian winter, even in imagination, maybe they seem a bit more miraculous now. Let your breathing slow even more. Feel the heaviness in your limbs, that pleasant weight that comes with deep relaxation. The story is over. The cold has released its grip. The fire has done its work. And you're ready to drift into whatever dreams may come, carried on the comfort of knowing that survival, even in the most extreme circumstances, is possible. Humans are remarkable. You're remarkable. And now it's time to sleep. Deep, peaceful, uninterrupted sleep. No fires to tend. No temperatures to worry about. No hunger to manage. Just rest. Just peace. Just the soft, gentle descent into sleep. Sweet dreams, friend. May they be warm and bright and filled with whatever brings you joy. You've traveled far tonight, through cold and darkness and the edges of human endurance. Now it's time to simply rest, close your eyes, let go, and sleep.